to have you here tonight. I personally am very thrilled for this moment because I have known Dr. Fernandez for a number of years and known him especially. For a little over the past year, and during that time, as you can imagine, when two Chinese medicine doctors get together, we don't just chit-chat about volleyball. We like to study, we like to talk about what we like to study. And actually, my very first time that I reached out to Ernesto, Dr. Ernesto, we call each other that in our spare time. I was asking about the Brederson protocol because I was so interested in it that I was intrigued about pursuing the training, and I knew that he had gone to the class and studied in person, and they had shifted to just having it online. So over the past couple of years, I've gotten to, I exaggerated, a little less than a year and a half.
2 years really.
2 years, we're just talking about that. I've gotten to ask a lot of questions and see how he approaches cases, and obviously I have a deep respect for this gentleman and the care and the compassion that he brings forward with him, not only to his clients' care, but into his approach and how he goes about crafting the styles of treatment that he wants to see with his clients. And so I have been lucky enough to get to peek over the fence and see how he goes about treating the Alzheimer's clients, the cognitive impairment client over the past couple of years, and I'm actually really thrilled to be here tonight. Thank you, sweetheart, for holding class for me again. And I'm gonna go take my chair. Without further ado, Dr. Ernesto Fernandez. Lots of personal information, a terrible resume introduction, so you get to do all that yourself.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. So a little bit of background about myself. You're all here because of the title of the presentation on reversing, memory issues and how to regain your memory naturally. So why I teach this, why this is an area of importance to me, is because early when I was in high school, I was a wrestler and I had 4 concussions. And from multiple injuries, by the time I reached my senior year, I had chronic pain, the entire left side of my body, couldn't sleep at night. It was a mess, to just put it simply. And the doctors really didn't know how to put Humpty Dumpty back together. I went through the whole medical route, and fortunately, through a really divine intervention type of thing, I met someone who started my path to getting my life back. Not only dealing with the chronic pain, dealing with the emotional issues from not sleeping for about a year, and that started the process. And he became my first mentor, and from there, I went on, first started my career as a body worker, then I got my master's in rehabilitation counseling, which is a mental health degree, but working with people with physical challenges. And in that program, I have 3 focuses. One is on brain injuries, surprise, surprise, post-traumatic stress disorder, and chronic pain. Because those 3 conditions are very interrelated. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, in terms of that interrelationship. And then once I finished my master's in counseling, and I was integrating that with body work, I found there's something more my people needed because they would get better. Had really great results addressing chronic pain and trauma, but they were relapse, or there's some things that just situations they wouldn't respond. So I knew there was something deeper and something more. So I went to Oriental Medicine School, and an acupuncture physician, and then it was another layer of integration of all my previous skills, and then I was fortunate to get in the speaking business, and I traveled for about 10 years internationally. It was a fantastic experience. I trained practitioners and instructors, but during that time, things got a little weird because a lot of stress when you're managing a seminar company with 25 plus instructors in 35 cities, plus me on the road myself. It was a lot. I took on a lot and exposed all my cognitive weaknesses from my concussions. and some traumas I thought I had resolved and really weren't fully resolved. And things started to kind of, the wheels started to fall off a bit. And it got so bad that in 2006, I got out of the business end of 2005. In 2006, I'm trying to work out my checkbook and I can't do simple math. It's like, oh, I have a problem. And I knew that I tried to read, and things that would normally pick up really quick, I had to read again and again, and reading just made me tired. It's like, and I talked to different practitioners, tried a lot of things, no one really kind of know what to do, and that started me, well, I gotta figure this out. And so I pieced a lot of things together. I found some practitioners that had pieces of the puzzle, and then that's what got me into like, okay, I really need to learn how to do this better, not just for me, but there's lots of people in my same situation. So I'm grateful to have my brain back. I had brain scans done, and you can really see 4 concussions at least in there. I probably had more that times I didn't remember, but it shows. However, I'm a walking example of, from a functional medicine point of view and natural medicine point of view, when you give the body the right pieces, the right elements, fundamental building blocks, function can increase, even though there may be an organic impairment still, and the body will repair. So I'm looking forward to my new scans, and we'll see how that goes. So further training that I received in this field, Cynthia mentioned the Brederson protocol. How many of you know what that is? 2 of you. So Dr. Dale Brederson, he is a medical doctor, neuroscientist or neurologist, one of the, I think the neuroscientists. And he happened to be married to a woman who's a functional medicine doctor. And so he liked studying the brain, and he started running all different tests to see what will help, what are the markers as to why does someone have cognitive decline. And he essentially identified 36 biomarkers. He calls them holes in the ceiling, holes in the roof, where a person, these are contributing factors that will break down not just your memory, but your whole cognitive ability, your ability to learn, your ability to make sense of things, your spatial motor abilities. These things are called cognitive domains. And so he started finding ways in terms of what are the optimal values that they need to be for a person to turn this around. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. I've also studied, got certified in a process called the Brain Longevity Program, put together by the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. And I was like the first group they trained, and I think they've done maybe 4 or 5 other trainings since then. And it pretty much dovetails with the Brederson protocol, but they're not heavy on a lot of the labs. They're more, their background is more yogic. So it's like diet and things that you do with your body. So there's no conflict to it. They just, they support each other. Then I've also studied a lot of Dr. Eamon's work. I'm not certified in their model, but I took a lot of what they do and superimposed on this tier. And then there's the work I studied in grad school with brain injury. And then from Oriental medicine, there's a whole other perspective of how we look at the brain and how the body repairs and heals. So I try to look at things from a couple different points of view, because everybody's so different in terms of how they develop the cognitive decline, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then how do you unwind it? How do you prepare their body for repair and healing, so they get their cognitive abilities back, or at least it will improve what you got. And so I want to give a perspective that, to be really functional and productive and have an enjoyable life, we need all our cognitive domains working at top level. right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Okay? But the other side of it is that really the way we're designed, or most of our brain isn't required in order to live, for the body to live. You've heard of people who like in vegetative states for years and supporting, they're fed by tubes and things like that. Yeah, it's not a way to live. Okay, none of us want that. That's why you guys are here tonight. That's why I studied this. And so why am I sharing this with you guys? Because the body prioritizes whatever energy and resources it has to what it needed to keep it alive and functioning.
Okay.
All right? So here I listed out, in Oriental medicine we use a model called the 5 elements, where we look at the different primary organs and glands of the body and we chunk into 5 sections, if you will, 5 groups. And these are the things that are vital for us to have working. And if there isn't enough nutrition or energy to support these guys well, guess who's going to miss out? Your brain. Okay. So it's trying to introduce a way of looking at this as to why people get cognitive decline. So you kind of have to look at brain dysfunction and cognitive decline like osteoporosis in a way. So what happens to osteoporosis? Everybody know what that is? Okay. Essentially, your bones weaken because you have insufficient calcium in your body, in your diet. But that's only part of it. It's calcium is missing in your diet. Minerals are missing in your diet. But there's another part to this as to why we develop osteoporosis. And that is because if you have a lot of inflammation in your body, the body doesn't like that inflammation, so it has to buffer. It has to reduce that inflammation somehow. So how is it going to do that? Well, if your diet is inadequate, it's going to pull these minerals out of your bones and out of your organs and glands in order to buffer this inflammation. So over time, if you're not replacing what your body is using up, you can have a deficit. Okay? And then the bones become brittle, and you know how that goes. Same thing happens in the brain. Okay? The priorities are going to go to these vital organs, and the brain is going to get what's left over. So let's go over the 7 primary causes. We talked about inflammation. So I have 7 here, and they're kind of grouped. This is 6 of them were identified by Dr. Brederson. And I group these in this way. The top one is hormonal imbalances. Whether it's insufficiency of testosterone production, thyroid, estrogen, estradiol, over time, your body's going to need this for these organs to do their job. But over time, if you have insufficient production of these hormones, which your brain needs to really have optimal function, that the link between hormone health and brain health is critical. And that's only been given attention just maybe less than 10 years. They've been really paying attention to that. I just had a little memory lapse. There's one thing I wanted to say earlier, and I forgot to mention when I was talking about osteoporosis. So what happens in our bodies with our bones, I'm going to talk the parallel what happens in the brain. There's something, osteoblasts is what helps build bone. So it's how is your diet and lifestyle set up so your body produces osteoblasts to produce bone. Osteoclasts is what is produced that breaks down bone. So the phenomenon of osteoporosis, your body is producing more osteoclasts, which is breaking down bone faster than it's producing osteoblasts. Okay, so we back up and look at the brain. There's synaptoblasts, which is this is phenomena which helps produce brain regeneration, but the brain's repairing itself. And then there's synaptoclastic, which is what breaks down the brain. You get the concept? Okay, so now we're talking about these are the synaptoclastic phenomena. So we talked about hormones. The second is what's called glycotrophic, and that is essentially sugar poisoning. You can look at it that way. When we consume carbohydrates well above beyond what our body's tolerance is. Okay. I was guilty of that for years, and that certainly did not help my concussions. I love bread. That was my weakness. Bread, grain, down. Okay.
Plus, they tell you bread, in the classic scenario, that's the staff of life. So you think that you're doing the best thing for yourself.
No, I knew better. I knew better. I can't blame it on marketing. I knew better. So what happens is, everybody's heard of prediabetes and diabetes. Well, that's what happens with your pancreas, okay, and your liver in terms of managing blood sugar in your body. Well, a person can be, a non-diabetic, a non-type 2 diabetic, and still develop a phenomenon called diabetes type 3. How many of you have heard that?
No.
Okay, diabetes type 3, which is diabetes of the brain. Where the person has had excessive carbs for long periods of time, and the brain, something shuts down with the brain that it can't utilize sugar as a fuel very efficiently anymore. And it starts in certain parts of the brain and then progresses, so essentially parts of your brain start to die off. It's starving, even though you're eating. Okay, and that term is being adopted now, which is a term that I think came out maybe 5 years ago or so. Now it's more widely recognized that this is a real thing that happens. But most neurologists are still clueless about it. They don't address that. You have to change a person's diet, because if the brain can't use sugar to fuel it, what does it have to use instead to fuel? What's the other alternative? Fats. Okay, but there's a dilemma though, because some people can't digest fats very well because the whole digestive system is compromised. So then you have to work with them to improve their ability to metabolize fats, so then you can convert them into being a sugar burner to a fat burner. For me, when I converted to being more of a fat burner, it's like the lights came on. I'm like a different guy. Okay. So those two, hormonal, glycotrophic, and insulin is tied in with this, and metabolic syndrome and things like that. The next two categories is what really drives inflammation. We talked inflammation earlier. Glycotrophic issues causes inflammation as well, but these two, toxins and infections. Toxins are all sorts of environmental toxins and chemicals that we become exposed to. You breathe it, you touch it, it's in your food or what you drink, and there's heavy metals, and they accumulate in your tissues, and they contribute to hormonal problems, and they can contribute to blood sugar handling problems. Okay? And it can trigger immune responses in your body, which creates more inflammation. So it all becomes this interconnected thing. And then there's infections. And infections range from parasitic infections, Lyme disease, Babesia, Bartonella, mold exposure. These are these chronic infections that people have. Also, sometimes they don't even know they have it. They just feel lousy. They just feel tired. They feel sick. Have all sorts of strange symptoms, and no one can really figure out what they have. Well, and the list goes on of different types of infections. People who had long-term chronic sinus infections and they keep getting antibiotics and keep coming back, more likely probably a chronic fungal infection they have, which contributes to this, which often needs to be cleared to address these kind of issues. Then come the next category with Dr. Brederson talks about circulatory in terms of optimal circulation in the brain. And so often there's some form of cardiac insufficiency where the brain isn't getting optimal blood supply, the person has a history of being a couch potato and doesn't get a whole lot of exercise. So, brain is a use it or lose it sort of organ. And if you're not getting optimal interactions, challenging your brain, not getting adequate exercise to get the blood circulating in all those little regions, the tissue just gets lazy. And in fact, the way the brain is designed, more than 2/3 of the brain is dedicated to movement. And that is protective of the parts of the brain that have to do with cognition. So the more regular movement you're involved in, that protects your cognition. So exercise is often an important component in reversing these conditions. Dr. Brederson and to my knowledge, Eamon doesn't really talk about the lymph system very much, nor the folks for his Alzheimer's and Research Prevention Foundation. So I bring this into it because when people who suffer from insomnia or years of poor sleep, interrupted sleep, the brain's ability to drain lymph is impaired because it only happens while you're sleeping. The brain has its own little lymphatic system called the lymphatic system. And if you have interrupted sleep, what happens is all this metabolic waste that your body is trying to clear out of the brain while you're sleeping gets interrupted. And it just kind of sits there and waits till maybe tomorrow night we'll get to this. And maybe the next night we'll get to this. And before you know it, all this waste starts to collect. And that's a toxin that you're producing from your own body. That's not coming from the outside, that's self-generated, which then also becomes inflammatory. And the cycle continues. And then there's concussions. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Most people think that a concussion is only going to affect your brain if you are passed out or have to be hospitalized. That's not true. I mean, sometimes I don't know if you ever had the experience, you're getting out of your car and bam, you hit the back of your head. They may not qualify from a clinical diagnosis as a concussion, but those kind of hits show up in brain scans.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I know in Florida, back when I first was visiting Florida as a kid, they had these windows, they turn this little crank and the things come out, and then you go running around the corner and like bam, hit one of these things. I mean, that happens a lot with kids. I've seen it happen, almost happened to me. All those kind of hits, it'll show in brain scans. And now to what degree does it impair cognition? Well, it depends how many of those you have. So think of how many of you had paper cuts? Okay? This little sliver, it hurts like a dickens, right? But imagine having the little paper cuts repeatedly over the same area. The tissue heals, and it'll heal, but it starts to scar. Okay? It doesn't heal the same way. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what happens in our brain. Just like we can have scars in our tissue, those, the neurons are affected, but the good news is the way they were designed, which is thank you, they were designed this way, is there's something called neuroplasticity. That if there are areas of the brain that are suboptimal functioning, there's ways of stimulating the brain and the body to create new pathways for that same function. Mm-hmm. Or even awaken dormant pathways that weren't affected for that function. pretty amazing how we design.
Right.
But we have to use it. So with this program, and thank you everybody for answering the little questions from the survey. Everybody, people do Sudoku and crossword puzzles and things like that. All that stuff is good. But the research is really clear that it's doing brain activities that make you really think hard is the stuff that really creates new synapses. If you want it from a brain game type of thing. There's a lot of research to support, it's called Brain HQ. I don't know if you've ever heard of that program. But my recommendation is that you have to put your pride aside to use that. Even if you like pre-bright, you try to do this thing, it's like, I'm an idiot, you know? Because it's designed to stretch you and make you work hard. And we're not, we think that we're thinking hard. No, we're not. Unless you're acting like trying to learn really hard things all the time, most of us are not really challenging our brains in a way to really create those new neural pathways. So that kind of program helps with that. So in the process I use with people, implementing, first identifying what's going on with you that are the drivers to the cognitive decline. There's a lot of different metrics, things to measure, and different labs to order to find out what is your specific combination. Because rarely does everybody have all of these, but most people have 3 or 4 of them. It's like, which 3 or 4 do you have? And if you have all of them, to what degree do you have them, and where do we begin? Okay, that process of unwinding the destructive mechanism and really engaging and reactivating, restoring that regenerative mechanism in your body. Okay? It's a process. I can have, 10 people show up with cognitive decline complaints of, they're more forgetful, they get, it's hard for them to learn, hard for them to remember, all these kind of things. But when you really assess their bodies, everybody's different in terms of how they got there, and everybody's different in terms of how you unwind it for them. It's a very personalized process. That's why, from a Western perspective, there's no cure, because a cure means, here's a problem, you do these 2 steps, and there's no more problem. That's the Western definition of a cure. From this is a rehabilitation process which is very personalized, and it doesn't fit under the category of a cure because you're rehabilitating your tissues. You're upgrading everything. Okay? So what I like to offer you guys, if you have an interest in really exploring this further for yourself, in terms of how can we work together. If you are brand new to us and you have not worked with us before, we're doing like a little intro. Cynthia, I don't know what we're calling it, but it's basically we do what's called an HSR, which is a heart sound recorder, which is endocardiograph, which measures the 4 valves of your heart. And why is that important? Because the quality, the strength of your heart, the rhythm of the heart, and the tone of the heart really impacts the function of the rest of your body. And that impacts your brain. And if you're not getting optimal circulation to the rest of your body, the brain isn't going to get it. So we do that. And then that includes 30 minutes with meeting with me to go over your goals and what the process looks like, to see if we can work together and how we can help you improve your cognition issues. If you're already a client of ours and you want to do this process, it's a 2-hour initial consultation. We will advise you on like what kind of labs you need to order. And when you get those results, we go over all those results and how we would target your treatment plan, for yourself, in terms of how we would implement this whole brain recovery, process for you. And that would include also an HSR and a full functional eval for you. And so what I'd like to do at this point is take about 15 minutes for questions. I covered a lot of material really fast, and this is a deep subject. Yes.
How does a hereditary factor play into the whole thing? Like, I understand there's stuff that we're gonna come upon, and each of us have individual things. I'm kind of concerned because on my mom's side, like, it's been, a lot of people have had this happen, and I'm trying to keep it from being me.
Great question.
Is hereditary a factor? Is genetics?
Well, there's two parts to that answer. Actually, maybe more than two. There's a gene called APOE4, and whether or not you have one copy or two copies determines your risk factor for developing it. So that's a genetic thing. However, the story doesn't stop there, because you have to look at, just because you have the gene for something, something has to turn on that gene to express itself. Now we're talking about epigenetics. So how you live your life